In the vast expanse of the Galactic Trade Academy, where 1,000 species learn to coexist among the stars, one simple truth echoes through the corridors. Respect is earned, not given. But what happens when that respect is violently challenged? When the pride of youth meets the fury of authority, and when the quiet strength of humanity decides it has seen enough. This is the story of Marcus Chun, a human teenager far from Earth, whose grandfather's war stories would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. This is the story of Instructor Vex High, whose iron discipline would meet something far stronger than fear. And this is the story of Jake Morrison, a mechanic whose calloused hands would teach an entire space station what it truly means to mess with the wrong species. Some lessons are learned in classrooms. Others are written in blood and steel. Welcome to the day the galaxy remembered why humans don't back down. The morning bells of Nexus Station rang across the massive structure, their harmonic frequencies calibrated to reach every species aboard. Marcus Chun pulled his academy uniform straight as he walked through the corridors that housed students from across the galaxy. The Galactic Trade Academy was humanity's greatest achievement in diplomatic education, a neutral ground where the children of diplomats, merchants, and leaders learned to navigate the complex web of interspecies relations. Marcus was 17, with a lean build common to those raised in artificial gravity, and carried himself with a confidence that came from being one of only 12 human students among the station's 3,000 inhabitants. His dark hair was kept regulation short, and his brown eyes held an intensity that made him stand out even among the exotic collection of alien youth surrounding him. The academy corridors were a marvel of engineering, with sections adjusted for different atmospheric needs and gravity preferences. Marcus watched a group of crystalline Zephyrians glide past, their faceted bodies refracting the station's light into dancing rainbows. Near the viewport lounges, massive Gorvanian students sat in specialized furniture that could support their rock-like physiology, while quick-moving Skitari darted between the legs of larger species like living mercury. Marcus made his way to advanced xenodiplomacy, taught by Instructor Vex High, a Krillian whose reputation for discipline was legendary throughout the academy. Krillians were imposing beings, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with chitinous exoskeletons that gleamed like polished obsidian. Their 4 arms were incredibly strong, and their compound eyes missed nothing. Vex High had served in the Krillian Defense Corps before transitioning to education, and he ran his classroom like a military unit. The classroom itself was a testament to galactic diversity. Environmental controls created microclimates for different species, and translation matrices ensured that every word spoken was understood by all present. Marcus took his seat near the middle of the room, nodding to Zara Telek, a Centaurian girl whose blue-tinged skin and silver hair marked her as nobility from the core worlds. Today we discuss the Treaty of Vega Prime, Vex High announced, his voice carrying the harsh consonants typical of his species. This agreement ended the bloodiest conflict in recent galactic history. The Terran Hegemony War claimed billions of lives across 17 systems. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The war had ended only 20 years ago, well within living memory for most species present. For humans, it was the defining moment that had earned them respect among the galactic community. Before the war, Earth was considered a backwater planet with an aggressive, primitive species barely worthy of trade agreements. Kethvar, a young hegemony prince whose purple skin and predatory features marked him as one of the former enemy, raised one of his 4 hands. Instructor, surely the war's outcome was inevitable. The hegemony controlled superior technology and resources. Human victory was merely an anomaly, a result of favorable circumstances. Several students murmured agreement. The hegemony had been the dominant force in this sector for centuries before humanity's arrival. They were a martial culture, believing deeply in the right of the strong to rule over the weak. Even in defeat, many hegemony worlds maintained that they had simply been unlucky rather than outfought. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest. His grandfather, Colonel James Chun, had served in that war. Marcus had grown up on stories of the desperate battles, the impossible odds, and the sacrifices made by human forces who refused to surrender even when facing extinction. My grandfather fought at New Gibraltar, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the classroom chatter. He was there when 3,000 humans held off 40,000 hegemony warriors for 6 weeks. He watched his friends die, buying time for civilian evacuations. Instructor Vexhi's compound eyes focused on Marcus with laser intensity. Student Shun, you will speak only when recognized in my classroom. But Marcus was warming to his subject, the pride in his heritage overwhelming his usual classroom discipline. The textbooks don't tell the real story. They don't talk about how human engineers jury-rigged weapons from mining equipment, or how medics operated on soldiers with nothing but field kits and determination. My grandfather said the hegemony never understood what they were fighting. They thought humans were just another client species that would fold when faced with superior force. Kethvar's expression hardened, his predatory features becoming more pronounced. One battle does not make a war, human. Your species simply benefited from Krillian and Centaurian intervention. Intervention that came only after humans proved they wouldn't break. Marcus shot back. The Battle of Proxima Station, the defense of Wolf 359, the last stand at Titan Base. Humans fought alone for 2 years before anyone believed we were worth saving. My grandfather has medals from battles your textbooks probably don't even mention. The classroom had gone silent. Even the environmental systems seemed muted as students from dozens of species watched the exchange with growing tension. Instructor Vexhi's forearms remained motionless, but Marcus could see the warning signs in his posture. Student Shun, you are disrupting the academic environment with emotional outbursts, Vexhi said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. Your species' tendency toward irrational pride is well documented. Marcus stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Irrational pride? Is it irrational to honor the memory of those who died protecting their families? My grandfather came home with shrapnel in his spine and nightmares that lasted decades. He earned the right to be remembered for what he accomplished. What he accomplished, Kethvar said with a sneer, was participating in a minor holding action while superior forces decided the war's true outcome. Human mythology has inflated these small contributions beyond all reasonable proportion. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. To hear his grandfather's sacrifice dismissed as mythology, to see the struggles and deaths of millions of humans reduced to footnotes in galactic history, ignited something primal in his chest. My grandfather didn't fight for mythology, Marcus said, his voice rising despite every lesson in diplomatic protocol he had ever learned. He fought because when the hegemony came to enslave Earth, humans looked them in the eye and said no. Not because we thought we could win, but because some things are worth dying for. Your people never understood that. That's why you lost. Instructor Vexhi moved with the lightning speed characteristic of his species. One moment he was standing behind his podium, the next he was towering over Marcus, one of his powerful arms drawn back. The classroom erupted in gasps and startled cries as students scrambled away from the confrontation. You will learn respect, young human, Vexhi snarled, his compound eyes blazing with fury. Your species' arrogance has been tolerated too long in this institution. The blow came fast and hard, Vexhi's chit in his hand striking Marcus across the face with enough force to send the teenager stumbling backward. The crack of the impact echoed through the suddenly silent classroom like a gunshot. Marcus tasted blood as he fought to stay on his feet, his vision blurring from the unexpected assault. For a moment, time seemed frozen. Marcus stood there, one hand pressed to his burning cheek, staring up at the alien instructor whose authority had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Around them, students watched in shock, some of the more aggressive species showing approval while others seemed disturbed by the violence. Then, the classroom door hissed open. Jake Morrison had been walking past on his way to the engineering deck when he heard the commotion. As head of the station's human technical staff, he was responsible for maintaining the delicate balance of systems that kept thousands of alien beings alive in the hostile environment of space. He was a big man, built like the heavy machinery he worked with scarred hands and a face weathered by years of hard labor. Jake stepped into the classroom and took in the scene immediately. The alien instructor standing over a human teenager, the boy's face showing the clear marks of a blow, the tension crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. Problem here? Jake asked, his voice deceptively calm as his eyes fixed on Instructor Vexhi. The Krillian instructor straightened to his full height, using his size advantage to intimidate. This is an academic matter, mechanic. Return to your duties. Jake's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a subtle readiness that spoke of experience with violence. Academic matter? Looks to me like an adult just hit a kid. Where I come from, we have a different name for that. The human student was being disrespectful and required correction, Vexai replied, his forearms spreading slightly in a display of dominance. Perhaps you should teach your young to show proper deference to their superiors. Marcus watched as Jake stepped fully into the classroom, the door hissing shut behind him. The mechanic was not particularly tall compared to many alien species, but there was something about his presence that seemed to fill the space around him. He moved with the confident economy of someone who had spent his life solving problems with his hands. Superior, Jake repeated, and there was something in his voice that made several students take another step backward. Let me tell you something about superiority, Bug. That kid you just hit? His grandfather was Colonel James Chun. You might want to look up what he did during the war before you decide who's superior to who. The name seemed to ripple through the classroom. Even among alien students, Colonel Chin's reputation was known. He had become something of a legend, the human officer who had held impossible positions and won unwinnable battles through sheer refusal to accept defeat. Instructor Vexai's compound eyes glittered with disdain. War heroes are common among all species, mechanic. It does not give their descendants the right to disrupt my classroom or show disrespect to their instructors. Jake nodded slowly, as if considering this point. You're right about one thing. Heroes are common. But you know what's not common? People who understand what it really means to fight for something. Your people surrendered the first time they met real resistance. The hegemony folded when things got tough. But humans, Jake smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We don't know how to quit. The mechanic began walking toward Vexai with deliberate steps, his hands hanging loose at his sides. Now, I think you owe that boy an apology. And then I think you, and I need to have a conversation about what happens to people who hit human kids on my station. Vexai's forearms tensed, his warrior training asserting itself. You dare threaten me, human? I am a decorated veteran of the Krillian Defense Corps. I have killed enemies of the state with my bare hands. Jake stopped directly in front of the alien instructor, close enough that he had to crane his neck back to meet those compound eyes. And I'm a grease monkey from Detroit who's had a really long week. Want to find out which one of those is scarier? The tension in the room had become almost unbearable. Students pressed themselves against the walls, unsure whether to flee or stay to witness what might become a legendary confrontation. Marcus, still holding his injured face, watched in fascination as two very different types of strength faced off in the middle of an alien classroom. For a long moment, neither man moved. Then, Instructor Vexai's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or threat. This is not over, mechanic, he said finally, stepping back from the confrontation. The boy's behavior will be reported to Academy administration. There will be consequences for this disruption. Jake nodded agreeably. I'm counting on it, because when administration reviews the security footage and sees you hitting a student, I think you'll find there are all kinds of consequences headed your way. The Krillian instructor's exoskeleton seemed to darken with anger, but he made no further move toward violence. Instead, he gathered his teaching materials with sharp, angry movements and stalked toward the classroom door. Class is dismissed, he announced without looking back. Report to your dormitories and contemplate the proper respect owed to your betters. As the alien instructor disappeared through the doorway, Jake turned his attention to Marcus, who was still standing in the center of the classroom, overwhelmed by what had just transpired. You okay, kid? Jake asked, his voice gentling as he examined the bruise forming on Marcus's cheek. Marcus nodded, though his face was throbbing and his mind was reeling. I didn't mean for this to happen. When they said those things about Grandpa. Hey, Jake placed a reassuring hand on the teenager's shoulder. You stood up for family. There's no shame in that. But next time someone wants to test what humans are made of, you can find me first. Let the adults handle the heavy lifting. As students began filing out of the classroom, many shooting curious or worried glances at the two humans, Marcus felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. He had defended his grandfather's memory, but he had also set in motion events that would have consequences far beyond a single classroom confrontation. Jake seemed to read his thoughts. Don't worry about what's coming next, the mechanic said. Sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. Your grandfather would understand that. As they left the classroom together, neither Marcus nor Jake could have imagined how prophetic those words would prove to be. The confrontation had been witnessed by students from dozens of species, and word was already spreading through the station's complex social networks. Some saw it as justice served to an arrogant human student. Others viewed it as an inappropriate display of violence by an instructor against a minor. But in the darker corners of the station, among those who had never accepted humanity's rise to prominence in galactic affairs, the incident was seen as something else entirely, an opportunity to put the upstart humans back in their proper place. The academy bells rang again, signaling the end of the class period, but for Marcus Chun and Jake Morrison, the real education was just beginning. The human quarter of Nexus Station was a small section compared to the vast alien territories, but it felt like home to Marcus as he walked through its familiar corridors. The walls here were painted in earth tones, and the artificial gravity was set to exactly one Earth standard. Pictures of terrestrial landscapes decorated the common areas, creating an illusion of being planetside rather than floating in the void between stars. Jake had insisted on taking Marcus to the human medical bay first, where Dr. Sarah Kim had examined the bruise on his face with professional concern and personal anger. The doctor was in her 40s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, and hands that moved with the precision of someone who had treated everything from minor injuries to massive trauma during her time on Frontier Worlds. "The bruising is superficial," she announced after running a medical scanner over Marcus's cheek. "But the impact could have caused serious damage. Krillian physiology includes natural bone spurs on their striking surfaces. A few inches higher, and he could have damaged your eye socket." Marcus winced as she applied a healing gel to the swollen area. The medication worked quickly, reducing both pain and inflammation, but the anger in Dr. Kim's voice was unmistakable. "This is unacceptable, Jake," she continued, directing her words to the mechanic who stood near the doorway. "That instructor assaulted a minor. If this were Earth space, he'd be facing criminal charges." Jake nodded grimly. "It's not Earth space, though. We're guests here, and the rules are different. But that doesn't mean we have to take it lying down." Marcus looked between the two adults, seeing something in their expressions that went beyond concern for his welfare. There was a wariness there, a recognition that this incident represented more than just a momentary loss of temper by an alien instructor. "There's going to be fallout from this, isn't there?" Marcus asked. Dr. Kim and Jake exchanged glances. It was Jake who answered, his voice carefully neutral. "Kid, you have to understand something about our situation here. Humans have been part of the galactic community for less than 30 years. To most species, we're still the new kids on the block. Some of them remember when we were considered barely civilized." Marcus knew the history, of course. Humanity's introduction to galactic society had been violent and chaotic, marked by first contact wars and diplomatic disasters. It had taken the Terran hegemony conflict to prove that humans deserved a seat at the galactic table. "But we proved ourselves," Marcus said. "The war showed everyone what we're capable of." Some people, Dr. Kim said quietly, didn't like what they saw. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the medical bay door chimed with an incoming communication. Jake activated the wall display, revealing the stern face of Admiral Patricia Valdez, the human administrator for the Academy section. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who had commanded respect in some of the most dangerous regions of space. "Mr. Morrison, Mr. Chun," she said without preamble, "please report to my office immediately. Dr. Kim, I'd like your medical assessment of the incident transmitted within the hour." The connection closed before any of them could respond. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the reality of his situation began to sink in. Admiral Valdez was known for her fairness, but she was also responsible for maintaining human relations with dozens of alien species. A diplomatic incident involving a human student could have consequences that reached far beyond the Academy. The walk to the administrative offices took them through several alien quarters, and Marcus began to notice things he had missed before. Conversations stopped when they passed. Groups of alien students watched them with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. A cluster of young hegemony nobles, including Kethvar from his class, stood near one of the main intersections, their purple skin darkened with what Marcus recognized as their species' equivalent of anger. "They're all talking about what happened," Marcus said quietly. Jake nodded, his eyes constantly moving to monitor their surroundings. Word travels fast on a closed station. By now, every species representative knows that a human student mouthed off to a Krillian instructor and a human mechanic backed him up. Is that bad? Depends on how you look at it. Some species will see it as humans being disrespectful and insubordinate. Others might see it as standing up to bullying. Jake paused as they entered a transport tube that would take them to the administrative level. The problem is the first group tends to have more political influence. Admiral Valdez's office was located in the neutral zone of the station, decorated with artifacts from dozens of worlds and designed to make representatives from any species feel comfortable. The Admiral herself was standing behind her desk when they entered, her expression unreadable as she gestured for them to sit. "Marcus, how are you feeling?" she asked, her tone professional but not unkind. "I'm fine. Mime. Dr. Kim says the damage is minor." The Admiral nodded, then activated a holographic display that showed security footage from classroom. Marcus watched himself arguing with Kethvar, saw his own passion as he defended his grandfather's memory, and winced as he relived the moment when Instructor Vexhai struck him. "The footage is quite clear," Admiral Valdez said. "You were engaged in a heated argument with another student, became emotional, and continued speaking after being told to stop. Instructor Vexhai's response was inappropriate and excessive, but your behavior was also problematic." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks again. "Ma'am, they were saying that humans didn't really contribute to winning the war. That my grandfather's service was just mythology. And how did you respond to that?" Marcus replayed his words in his head, realizing how they must have sounded to alien ears. "I told them that humans fought because some things were worth dying for, and that's why we won." Admiral Valdez was quiet for a long moment. "Marcus, do you understand how that statement might be interpreted by other species? Especially by former enemies of humanity?" The truth hit Marcus like cold water. By declaring that humans had won the war because they were willing to die for their beliefs, he had essentially told a room full of alien students that their species lacked the courage and conviction that humans possessed. To proud species like the hegemony and the Krillians, such a statement would be seen as an insult that demanded a response. "I didn't mean it that way," Marcus said weakly. "Intent doesn't always matter in diplomacy," the Admiral replied. "What matters is how your words are perceived and what actions they provoke." She turned to Jake, her expression becoming more stern. "Mr. Morrison, your intervention in the classroom was well-intentioned, but it has created additional complications. Instructor Vexhai is claiming that you threatened him with physical violence." Jake shrugged, seemingly unconcerned. "I told him he owed the kid an apology and that we needed to have a conversation. If he interpreted that as a threat, maybe he's got a guilty conscience." 36 students witnessed the confrontation. Their testimony will carry weight with the Academy Review Board. "Good," Jake replied. "Let them testify about seeing an adult alien hit a human teenager. Let's see how that plays in the galactic media." Admiral Valdez rubbed her temples, the gesture revealing the stress she was under. "Jake, you have to understand the position this puts us in. The Academy is supposed to be neutral ground. If human staff members are perceived as taking sides in student disputes, taking sides." Jake's voice rose slightly. "Admiral, with all due respect, this wasn't about taking sides. This was about protecting a kid from an adult who lost his temper and decided to use his fist to make a point." The office fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Marcus could see the conflict in Admiral Valdez's expression, the tension between her duty to maintain diplomatic relations and her instinct to protect the humans under her command. A chime indicated an incoming priority message. The Admiral activated her communication system, and the face of Ambassador Thukel appeared on the display. The Krillian diplomat was ancient even by his species standards, with an exoskeleton that had deepened to the color of polished jet and compound eyes that held the weight of centuries. "Admiral Valdez," the ambassador said without preamble, "I trust you have reviewed the incident involving your student and Instructor Vexhai." "I have, Ambassador. I'm prepared to discuss appropriate disciplinary measures for the human student involved." Thoracanel's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned to recognize as displeasure. "Disciplinary measures for the student are insufficient. The human mechanic who threatened a respected member of our educational staff must face consequences as well." Jake started to speak, but Admiral Valdez silenced him with a gesture. "Ambassador, I believe there may be some misunderstanding about the nature of Mr. Morrison's actions." "There is no misunderstanding," the Krillian interrupted. "The human threatened violence against a Krillian citizen. This is unacceptable and demands a formal response." Unless appropriate action is taken, the Krillian delegation will be forced to reconsider our participation in this academy. The threat hung in the air like a sword. The Krillian Confederation was one of the major powers in this sector, and their withdrawal from the academy would be a devastating blow to the institution's mission of interspecies cooperation. I see, Admiral Valdez said carefully. What response would the Krillian delegation consider appropriate? The mechanic must be removed from the station and barred from future service with any academy facility. The student must issue a formal apology to Instructor Vexi and to the Krillian delegation for his disrespectful behavior. Additionally, human students must undergo mandatory cultural sensitivity training to prevent future incidents. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. The ambassador was essentially demanding that Jake be fired and that all human students be treated as potential troublemakers who needed special monitoring. Admiral Valdez was quiet for several seconds. Ambassador, these seem like rather severe measures for what was essentially a classroom dispute that got out of hand. Severe measures are required when dealing with a species that has demonstrated consistent problems with authority and proper social hierarchy, Thoricanel replied. Humans have a documented pattern of insubordination and violence when challenged. This incident merely confirms what many have long suspected about your people's fitness for civilized society. Jake's hands had clenched into fists at his sides, but his voice remained level when he spoke. Ambassador, maybe you'd like to check your history files about human fitness for civilized society. Last I checked, we were the ones who stopped the hegemony from turning this whole sector into a slave empire. The Krillian's compound eyes fixed on Jake with laser intensity. Ah yes, the human tendency to invoke past conflicts when faced with present responsibilities. Your species seems incapable of growth beyond its warrior origins. Our warrior origins, Jake said quietly, are what kept you from having to bow to hegemony masters. Maybe you should think about that before you start questioning our fitness for civilization. Ambassador Thorekanael's exoskeleton darkened with anger. Admiral, you will control your subordinate, or I will consider this conversation concluded and proceed with formal charges through the Galactic Arbitration Council. Admiral Valdez held up a hand before Jake could respond. Ambassador, I believe emotions are running high on all sides. Perhaps we should schedule a formal meeting tomorrow to discuss this matter with clearer heads. Very well, Thoricanel replied. But understand that the Krillian position will not change. The humans involved in this incident must face consequences, or there will be a broader reckoning. The communication ended, leaving the three humans alone in the suddenly quiet office. Marcus could see the weight of command settling on Admiral Valdez's shoulders as she contemplated the impossible position she was being placed in. Admiral, Marcus said quietly, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. She looked at him with an expression that mixed sympathy with resignation. Marcus, intent doesn't change consequences. We're going to have to navigate this very carefully, or it could affect every human in the Academy program. Jake stood up, his expression grim. Admiral, you're not seriously considering giving in to their demands, are you? If we back down now, every alien with a grudge against humanity will know they can push us around. And if we don't back down, we could lose our seat at the table entirely, Admiral Valdez replied. Sometimes, Jake, discretion really is the better part of valor. The mechanic's laugh was harsh and bitter. Discretion? Admiral, they just told you that humans aren't fit for civilized society. They demanded that we apologize for standing up to a bully who hit a kid. There's a word for that kind of discretion, and it's not valor. Marcus watched the exchange with growing understanding of the forces at play around him. This was about more than just a classroom incident or even his injured pride. This was about humanity's place in a galactic community that had never fully accepted them as equals. What do we do? He asked. Admiral Valdez was quiet for a long moment. We try to find a middle ground that satisfies everyone involved. Jake shook his head. Admiral, some things don't have a middle ground. Sometimes you have to pick a side and live with the consequences. As they prepared to leave the office, Marcus realized that Jake was right. The events of the day had created a situation where compromise might not be possible. Lines had been drawn, positions had been taken, and the entire human community on Nexus Station was going to have to decide what they were willing to accept and what they were prepared to fight for. The teenager who had walked into that classroom that morning defending his grandfather's memory was gone. In his place stood someone who was beginning to understand that some battles were bigger than any individual, and some principles were worth whatever price had to be paid to defend them. Outside Admiral Valdez's office, the station continued its normal routines. But beneath the surface, currents of anger and resentment were building towards something that would test not just the Academy's mission of interspecies cooperation, but humanity's resolve to maintain its hard-won place among the stars. The war for respect was about to begin again, and this time it would be fought not on distant battlefields, but in the corridors and classrooms where the next generation was supposed to be learning to live in peace. The Human Recreation Center was more crowded than Marcus had ever seen it. Word of the classroom incident had spread through the station's human community like wildfire, and by evening, nearly every human on Nexus Station had gathered to discuss what should be done. The room buzzed with heated conversations as engineers, technicians, teachers, and support staff debated their response to the Krillian ultimatum. Marcus sat near the back with Jake, still feeling the weight of responsibility for everything that had happened. His face had healed thanks to Dr. Kim's treatment, but the bruise remained as a visible reminder of how quickly diplomatic situations could turn violent. At the front of the room, Admiral Valdez stood beside a holographic display showing the station's political breakdown. The image revealed just how precarious humanity's position really was. Of the 43 species represented on Nexus Station, humans made up less than 2% of the population. The major powers, Krillians, Hegemony, Centaurians, and others controlled the vast majority of resources and influence. The situation is delicate, Admiral Valdez was saying. Ambassador Thukinel has made it clear that the Krillian delegation views this as a test of whether humans can be trusted to follow proper diplomatic protocols. If we refuse their demands, it could jeopardize not just the Academy program, but our trade agreements and defense treaties throughout this sector. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the head of the human academic staff, raised her hand. Admiral, with respect, their demands are completely unreasonable. They want Jake fired for protecting a student, and they want Marcus to apologize for defending his family's honor. How is caving to bullying supposed to demonstrate our fitness for civilized society? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Marcus could see the anger in the faces around him, but he could also see the fear. Everyone understood what was at stake. Chief Engineer Tom Bradley stood up from his seat near the front. He was a massive man, built like the starship drives he maintained, with hands that could crush steel and a voice that could be heard over the roar of fusion engines. I've been working with alien crews for 15 years, he said. You know what I've learned? Respect is earned, not given. Every time we back down, every time we apologize for being human, they respect us a little less. Jake nodded from his seat beside Marcus. Tom's right. These people don't understand compromise. They understand strength. You show weakness once, and they'll keep pushing until you're back to being a client species begging for scraps. Admiral Valdez's expression tightened. Mr. Morrison, the consequences of taking a hard line could be catastrophic. If the Krillians withdraw from the Academy, other species might follow. We could lose everything we've worked to build. Everything we've worked to build? Jake stood up, his voice rising. Admiral, what we've worked to build is supposed to be based on equality and mutual respect. If that's gone, then what exactly are we trying to preserve? Marcus watched the debate with growing understanding of the impossible choice facing the human community. Standing up to the alien demands might cost them their place in the galactic community. But backing down would confirm what their critics had always claimed. The humans were an inferior species that could be bullied into submission. The discussion was interrupted by a chime from the communication system. Admiral Valdez activated the display, revealing the face of Captain Sarah Mitchell, the commander of the Human Defense Contingent on the station. Mitchell was a veteran of the Terran Hegemony War, with a reputation for tactical brilliance and absolute loyalty to her people. Admiral, Mitchell said without preamble, we have a situation developing. I'm getting reports of organized harassment of human personnel throughout the station. Alien security forces are conducting random inspections of human quarters. Human students are being subjected to intimidation and threats in the corridors. The room erupted in angry voices. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that the conflict was escalating beyond a simple diplomatic dispute. Admiral Valdez held up a hand for silence. Captain, are station security forces involved? Negative. This appears to be coordinated action by student groups and civilian personnel from multiple species. They're staying within the technical bounds of station regulations. But the message is clear. Humans are no longer welcome here. Jake cursed under his breath. They're trying to force us out without a formal confrontation. Make life so miserable that we leave voluntarily. Dr. Kim stood up from her seat near the medical staff. Admiral, I've been treating human personnel for accidents all day. Slip-in, fall injuries, equipment malfunctions, food poisoning from the alien cafeterias. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidental. The display screen split to show feeds from security cameras throughout the station. Marcus could see groups of alien students confronting isolated humans in corridors, maintenance bays where human technicians were being excluded from work areas, and dining facilities where humans sat alone while other species gathered in hostile clusters. This is coordinated, Chief Bradley said grimly. Someone's organizing this campaign. The question is, how do we respond? Admiral Valdez was quiet for a long moment, studying the security feeds with the expression of someone weighing impossible choices. We document everything, file formal complaints with station administration, and try to de-escalate through proper channels. The response was immediate and negative. Voices rose throughout the room as human personnel expressed their frustration with what many saw as inadequate action in the face of systematic harassment. Admiral, Jake said, his voice cutting through the noise, with all due respect, filing complaints isn't going to stop this. These people are testing us. They want to see if we'll fight back or if we'll just roll over and accept whatever they dish out. And what do you propose, Mr. Morrison? That we start our own campaign of harassment? That we abandon the principles we're supposed to be representing here? Jake was quiet for a moment, then looked around the room at the faces of his fellow humans. I propose we remind everyone on this station what happens when you push humans too far. The room fell silent. Marcus could feel the tension building like pressure in a fusion chamber approaching critical mass. Around him, he saw engineers and technicians who had built their careers on precision and problem-solving, teachers who had dedicated their lives to building bridges between species, and support staff who had left Earth to be part of something bigger than themselves. But he also saw something else, the genetic memory of a species that had fought its way up from primitive tribalism to become a spacefaring civilization. The same stubborn refusal to surrender that had won the Terran Hegemony War was visible in every face in the room. Dr. Rodriguez spoke into the silence. What exactly are you suggesting, Jake? I'm suggesting we stop pretending this is about diplomacy, Jake replied. This is about whether humans have a place in the galactic community as equals, or whether we're going to be treated as second-class citizens who have to apologize for existing. Admiral Valdez shook her head. Mr. Morrison, escalating this conflict could have consequences that reach far beyond this station. Earth's colonial governments, our trade relationships, our military alliances, all of it could be at risk. It's already at risk, Chief Bradley interjected. Admiral, they're not going to stop at this station. If they can push us around here, they'll do it everywhere. Sometimes you have to make a stand, regardless of the consequences. Marcus found himself standing up before he realized he had made the decision to speak. The room turned toward him, dozens of adult faces focusing on the teenager who had started this crisis with his passionate defense of his grandfather's memory. I want to say something, Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. This is all my fault. I'm the one who lost his temper in class. I'm the one who said things that offended the other species. Maybe I should just apologize. Maybe if I do what they want, this will all go away. The room was completely silent. Marcus could see the conflict in the faces around him. The desire to protect him warring with the knowledge that his apology would be seen as an admission that humans were, in fact, inferior beings who needed to beg forgiveness for standing up for themselves. Jake placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Kid, you've got nothing to apologize for. You stood up for your grandfather's memory and for everything he fought for. That's not something to be ashamed of. Dr. Kim nodded agreement. Marcus, you were defending historical truth. Your grandfather and millions like him died to protect human freedom and dignity. Apologizing for that would be a betrayal of their sacrifice. Admiral Valdez looked around the room, seeing the resolve building in the faces of her personnel. People, I understand the emotions involved here, but we have to think beyond our immediate anger. We have to consider the long-term consequences of our actions. Captain Mitchell's voice came through the communication system. Admiral, I'm getting reports that human personnel are being excluded from essential station operations. Engineering teams are being told their services are no longer required. Food service personnel are being denied access to alien dietary requirements. They're trying to make us irrelevant. The implications hit the room like a physical blow. Nexus Station was a complex organism that required the cooperation of dozens of species to function. Humans had carved out their niche by becoming indispensable in certain technical areas. If they were being systematically excluded from those operations, their position would become untenable. Jake stood up again, his expression grim with determination. Admiral, they've made their choice. They want to find out what happens when you push humans into a corner. I say we show them. What are you proposing? Admiral Valdez asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Work stoppage. Complete withdrawal of human technical support until station administration addresses the harassment and discrimination. Let's see how long their environmental systems and fusion reactors run without human maintenance. The suggestion sent a ripple of excitement and apprehension through the room. A work stoppage would be a dramatic escalation, but it would also demonstrate just how important human expertise had become to the station's operation. Chief Bradley was nodding. It could work. We maintain critical systems throughout the station. Power distribution, atmospheric processing, gravitational field generation. They'd notice our absence within hours. Dr. Rodriguez looked concerned, but it would also confirm what they're saying about humans being disruptive and insubordinate. It could justify their demands for our removal. They're already demanding our removal, Jake pointed out. At least this way, we go out standing up instead of crawling. Marcus listened to the debate with growing understanding that this moment would define not just his own future, but the future of human involvement in galactic civilization. The choice was stark: submit to alien demands and accept second-class status, or fight back with the knowledge that failure could mean exile from the community they had worked so hard to join. Admiral Valdez was quiet for a long time, studying the faces of her people and the security feeds showing the systematic harassment of human personnel throughout the station. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of command decision. People, I want everyone to understand what we're considering here. A work stoppage would be an act of defiance that could result in our permanent expulsion from the Academy program. It could damage Earth's relationships with dozens of alien governments. It could undo decades of diplomatic progress. She paused, looking directly at Marcus. But it would also send a message that humans will not be intimidated, that we will not apologize for being who we are, and that we will not accept treatment as inferior beings. The Admiral's next words would echo through the human community for years to come. Sometimes, principles are more important than consequences. Sometimes, you have to risk everything to preserve what makes you who you are. Jake smiled for the first time since the crisis began. So we're doing this. Admiral Valdez nodded slowly. We're doing this, but we do it professionally, we do it safely, and we do it with the understanding that there may be no way back from this decision. As the meeting broke up and human personnel began coordinating their response, Marcus realized that his grandfather's legacy was alive in this room. The same spirit that had driven humans to fight impossible odds in the Terran Hegemony War was now preparing to face a different kind of battle, one fought not with weapons, but with a refusal to surrender their dignity. The war for respect was about to enter a new phase, and this time, humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the right to stand as equals among the stars. The first sign that something was wrong came at 0600 station time, when the environmental recycling systems began producing air with a slight metallic tang that made breathing uncomfortable for most species aboard Nexus Station. By 0630, the gravitational field generators in several alien quarters had developed an oscillating fluctuation that made walking difficult. At 0700, the fusion reactors began operating at reduced efficiency, causing power fluctuations throughout the station. Marcus stood in the main human engineering bay, watching Jake and Chief Bradley coordinate the most comprehensive work stoppage in the history of interspecies cooperation. Around them, dozens of human technicians monitored critical systems while carefully avoiding any actions that would maintain or repair alien-controlled areas of the station. Status report. Jay called out as he reviewed a holographic display showing power distribution throughout the massive structure. Atmosphere processing in the Krillian quarter is down to 60% efficiency, reported engineer Lisa Chun, Marcus's cousin who had trained on Earth before joining the Academy staff. Their air is still breathable, but it's getting pretty stale in there. Chief Bradley nodded grimly. Hegemony residential sections are experiencing gravity fluctuations between 0.7 and 1.3 standard. Not dangerous, but definitely uncomfortable for a species that evolved in high gravity. In the Centaurian diplomatic wing, Jake asked, their environmental controls are stuck in what they consider winter mode. Lisa replied with a slight smile. Temperatures dropped 15 degrees below their comfort zone. They're functional but miserable. Marcus watched the systematic degradation of station operations with mixed feelings. The human technical staff were demonstrating their indispensability without actually endangering lives, but the psychological impact on the alien population was already visible through security monitors. Groups of alien students and staff were gathering in common areas, their conversations growing increasingly agitated as the station's perfect environmental balance deteriorated. Jake, Dr. Kim's voice came over the communication system. I'm getting reports of increased medical complaints from alien quarters. Nothing serious, but elevated stress indicators and discomfort symptoms. They're starting to understand what human technical expertise means to this station. Good, Jake replied. Maybe now they'll be ready to negotiate like equals instead of trying to dictate terms. The main display screen activated, showing the face of Station Commander Veltar, a Centaurian whose blue-tinged skin had darkened with stress. As the highest-ranking non-military official on Nexus Station, Veltar was responsible for maintaining the delicate balance between dozens of competing species and interests. Chief Morrison, the commander said without preamble, I trust you're aware of the systematic failures occurring throughout the station. Jake nodded calmly. Yes, sir. We're monitoring the situation closely, and I trust you're prepared to deploy human technical teams to address these failures. I'm afraid human technical teams are currently unavailable for station-wide operations, Jake replied. We're focusing our efforts on maintaining life-critical systems in human quarters only. Commander Veltar's expression hardened. Chief Morrison, this work stoppage is an unacceptable violation of your contractual obligations to this station. I'm ordering you to resume normal operations immediately. With respect, Commander, our contractual obligations don't include accepting harassment and intimidation of our personnel. When station administration addresses the systematic discrimination against humans, we'll be happy to resume full operations. The Centaurian's silver hair seemed to shimmer with agitation. This is extortion, Chief Morrison. You're holding the entire station hostage to protect one unruly student and one overzealous mechanic. Marcus felt the familiar heat of anger rise in his chest, but Jake's calm response kept the situation from escalating. Commander, we're simply exercising our right to withdraw our labor in response to hostile working conditions. I believe that's a recognized principle under galactic labor codes. Labor codes do not override safety requirements, Veltar replied. If station systems fail and lives are lost, no lives will be lost, Chief Bradley interrupted, stepping into view of the communication pickup. We're maintaining all life-critical systems. Environmental processing, emergency power, medical facilities, food safety, all of it is operating normally. What we're not maintaining is comfort systems and non-essential operations. Commander Veltar was quiet for a moment, calculating the implications. Very well, but understand that this action will have consequences. The species representatives are already demanding action from the Galactic Trade Council. Let them demand, Jake said. We'll be happy to explain to the Trade Council how this situation started with an instructor assaulting a human student and escalated when station administration failed to address organized harassment of human personnel. The communication ended, leaving the humans alone in their engineering bay. Marcus could feel the tension in the air, but there was also something else, a sense of purpose and unity that he had never experienced before. Think it's working? He asked. Lisa Chun looked up from her monitoring station. Oh, it's working. I'm getting private communications from alien technical staff asking for emergency assistance. Turns out a lot of them don't actually know how to fix the systems they've been taking for granted. Dr. Kim's voice came over the intercom again. Jake, you need to see the security feeds from the alien quarters. Jake activated the main display, cycling through camera feeds from throughout the station. What Marcus saw made him understand just how dependent the other species had become on human technical expertise. In the Krillian quarters, groups of normally disciplined students were arguing loudly as they tried to manually adjust environmental controls. The hegemony section showed purple-skinned figures stumbling awkwardly as they struggled with gravity fluctuations. Even the sophisticated Centaurians appeared frustrated as they dealt with temperature variations that disrupted their carefully regulated metabolisms. "They're suffering," Marcus said quietly. "They're learning," Jake corrected. "Learning what it costs to maintain the kind of technological infrastructure they've come to expect." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The same human technical ingenuity that had helped win the Terran-Hegemony War was now demonstrating why humanity had earned its place in galactic civilization. Humans weren't just warriors. They were builders, fixers, problem solvers who made complex systems work reliably. Admiral Valdez's voice came over the communication system. "All human personnel, report to the main assembly area. We have visitors." Marcus followed Jake and the engineering teams through corridors that were noticeably different from that morning. The lighting was slightly dimmed due to power conservation measures. The air circulation was sluggish enough that conversations seemed muffled. Even the gravitic lifts moved with a subtle hesitation that spoke of systems operating without proper maintenance. The human assembly area was packed with every human on the station. Nearly 200 people representing Earth's entire presence in this sector of galactic space. At the front of the room, Admiral Valdez stood beside a holographic display showing the faces of several alien ambassadors and government officials. "People," Admiral Valdez announced, "we have received formal responses to our work stoppage from several major powers. Ambassador Thoricanel of the Krillian Confederation wishes to address us directly." The holographic display focused on the ancient Krillian diplomat, whose compound eyes glittered with barely contained fury. "Humans of Nexus Station," he began, his voice carrying the harsh consonants of a species language. "Your actions today represent a clear violation of interspecies cooperation protocols. You have proven what many have long suspected, that your species lacks the maturity for true galactic citizenship." Angry murmurs rose from the human crowd, but Admiral Valdez gestured for silence. Thoricanel continued. "However, the Krillian Confederation is prepared to show mercy. Resume normal operations immediately, issue formal apologies for your disruptive behavior, and accept enhanced oversight of your technical operations. Do this, and you may remain on the station under appropriate supervision." The ambassador's next words carried the weight of an ultimatum. "Refuse these generous terms, and the Krillian Confederation will formally petition the Galactic Trade Council to revoke human participation in all Academy programs. You will be banned from interspecies education and confined to your own stellar territory." The room erupted in outraged voices. Marcus could see the same anger in every face that he had felt when Kethvar dismissed his grandfather's sacrifice. These people had dedicated their lives to building bridges between species, only to be told they were unfit for galactic citizenship. Jake stood up in the middle of the crowd. "Admiral, ask the ambassador something for me." Admiral Valdez looked uncertain, but nodded. "Ambassador Thoricanel, Chief Morrison has a question." "I do not negotiate with mechanics," the Krillian replied dismissively. Jake's smile was sharp and cold. "That's funny, because right now you're breathing recycled air that mechanics keep clean, using gravity fields that mechanics maintain, and depending on fusion reactors that mechanics designed. But sure, don't negotiate with mechanics. See how that works out for you." The ambassador's compound eyes focused on Jake with laser intensity. "Your species' arrogance knows no bounds. You think your primitive tinkering makes you indispensable." "I don't think anything," Jake replied. "I know. Want proof? Check your environmental readings. Your atmospheric processing efficiency has dropped another 10% in the last hour. Your gravity generators are developing harmonic resonances that'll shake your quarters apart if they're not corrected. And your fusion reactors are building up contamination in the plasma chambers that'll cause a cascade failure within 48 hours. The ambassador was silent for a moment, clearly receiving information from his own technical staff. When he spoke again, his voice carried less certainty. "These are temporary malfunctions. Our own technicians can address them." Chief Bradley laughed, the sound carrying no humor. "Ambassador, with all due respect, your technicians couldn't maintain a flashlight without human technical manuals. You want to know why? Because this station was built using human engineering principles. The environmental systems, based on designs developed during Earth's colonial expansion. The fusion reactors, modified versions of the drives that powered human ships during the war. The gravitational field generators, improved copies of human artificial gravity systems. The truth of Bradley's words hit the alien representatives like a physical blow. Marcus could see it in their expressions. The dawning realization that their technological superiority was largely based on human innovations that they had never fully understood. Admiral Valdez stepped forward. Ambassador Thurkadell, I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of human contributions to galactic civilization. We're not primitive tinkerers or disruptive troublemakers. We're the people who make complex systems work reliably under impossible conditions. And Jake added, we're the people who decide whether those systems continue working. The silence that followed was deafening. Through security monitors, Marcus could see alien personnel throughout the station gathering around communication screens, listening to the confrontation that would determine the future of human involvement in galactic society. Ambassador Thurkanel finally spoke, his voice carefully controlled. What are your terms? Admiral Valdez looked around the room at her people, seeing the same determination that had driven humans to challenge a galactic empire and win. Our terms are simple, Ambassador. Full equality. No special oversight, no mandatory apologies, no enhanced supervision. Human students and staff will be treated with the same respect accorded to any other species on this station. Impossible, Thorkanel replied immediately. Your species has demonstrated that it cannot be trusted with unsupervised authority. Then, I guess you'll have to learn to fix your own fusion reactors, Jake said calmly. Because we're done accepting second-class treatment. The communication screen went dark as the alien ambassadors cut the connection, leaving 200 humans alone in a room that suddenly felt very small compared to the vast station around them. Admiral Valdez looked at her people with pride and apprehension. Well, people, we've made our choice. Now we live with the consequences. Marcus realized that his grandfather's war stories had prepared him for this moment. Not the tactics or the weapons, but the understanding that some principles were worth any sacrifice. Around him, human engineers and teachers and support staff were making the same choice that Colonel James Chun had made decades ago, to stand up for what they believed in, regardless of the cost. The battle for respect was entering its final phase, and this time, humans weren't fighting for survival. They were fighting for dignity. 18 hours into the human work stoppage, Nexus Station had become a very different place. The corridors that had once hummed with perfect environmental control now carried an edge of uncertainty that made every alien aboard acutely aware of how much they had taken for granted. Marcus walked through the human quarter with Jake, observing the systematic demonstration of human technical indispensability that was reshaping the balance of power on the station. Status report. Marcus asked, though he could see the answer in Jake's grim expression of satisfaction. Environmental processing in alien quarters is down to 40% efficiency, Jake replied, checking his portable scanner. Gravity fluctuations are getting worse. Some sections are experiencing microgravity episodes that last several minutes. And the fusion reactors. He paused, his expression becoming more serious. The contamination buildup is accelerating. They've got maybe 30 hours before they're forced to shut down primary power. Marcus felt a chill despite the perfectly regulated temperature in the human section. What happens if the reactors shut down? Emergency power kicks in, but it only supports life-critical systems. No artificial gravity, minimal environmental control, emergency lighting only. This station would become barely habitable for most species aboard. They passed a group of human technicians monitoring communication intercepts from alien quarters. The conversations they were overhearing painted a picture of growing desperation among the station's non-human population. The Krillian technical teams have been working for 12 hours straight trying to stabilize their atmosphere processors, reported engineer Lisa Chen. They're making it worse. Oxygen levels in their quarters are now fluctuating between 18 and 23%. Chief Bradley looked up from a holographic display showing power distribution throughout the station. Hegemony leadership is demanding that their home fleet intervene militarily. They want to seize human quarters and force our personnel to resume maintenance operations. Let them try, Jake said quietly. This station's defensive systems are controlled by human-designed computers running human-written software. Good luck getting past the security protocols without human cooperation. The irony was overwhelming. The same species that had dismissed humans as primitive troublemakers were now discovering that human technical expertise was woven into every system that kept their civilized society functioning. From environmental controls to defensive systems, from power generation to waste processing, human innovations have become the invisible foundation of galactic technological infrastructure. A priority communication chime echoed through the human quarters. Admiral Valdez's voice came over the intercom. All personnel to assembly area immediately. We have incoming ships. The main display in the human assembly area showed external sensor readings that made Marcus's blood run cold. 3 massive vessels were approaching Nexus Station. A Krillian battlecruiser, a hegemony dreadnought, and a Centaurian diplomatic vessel that was larger than many military ships. Admiral Valdez stood before her assembled personnel, her expression mixing determination with concern. People, the situation has escalated beyond what any of us anticipated. The approaching vessels represent a coordinated response from the major galactic powers. They've apparently decided that our work stoppage constitutes a threat to interspecies stability. Captain Mitchell's face appeared on a secondary display from the Human Defense Command Center. Admiral, the Krillian battlecruiser is broadcasting surrender demands. They're giving us 1 hour to resume full operations and surrender human leadership for prosecution under galactic security laws. Jake laughed, but the sound carried no humor. They want to prosecute us for refusing to fix their broken equipment? That's a new one. The legal justification doesn't matter, Admiral Valdez replied. What matters is that 3 major powers are willing to use military force to resolve this situation. We have to consider our response very carefully. Chief Bradley stood up from his monitoring station. Admiral, I've been analyzing the technical specifications of those incoming ships. Want to know something interesting? All 3 vessels use modified human reactor designs. Their defensive systems run on human-developed AI algorithms. Even their life support systems are based on human environmental control technology. The implications hit the room like a wave. Marcus could see understanding dawn on faces throughout the assembly area. The same species that were threatening military action against humans were completely dependent on human technical innovations for their own military capabilities. They're bluffing, Dr. Kim said suddenly. They can't afford to actually attack us. If they destroy the human technical staff, who's going to maintain their ships? Jake nodded grimly. It's a poker game. They're betting we'll fold rather than risk military confrontation. But they're also betting they can win without us, and that's a bet they can't afford to lose. The main display activated, showing the bridge of the approaching Krillian battlecruiser. Admiral Thekmore, the ship's commander, appeared on screen in full military regalia. His compound eyes glittered with the cold fury of a predator that had been challenged. Humans of Nexus Station, he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. You have 30 minutes to resume normal operations and surrender the instigators of this illegal action. Failure to comply will result in the seizure of this station and the arrest of all human personnel. Admiral Valdez stepped forward. Admiral Thekmore, human personnel are operating within established galactic labor laws. Our withdrawal of services is a legitimate response to documented harassment and discrimination. Your withdrawal of services has endangered thousands of beings aboard this station, the Krillian replied. This constitutes an act of terrorism under galactic security statutes. Jake moved into view of the communication pickup. Admiral, maybe you'd like to explain how refusing to fix your broken equipment counts as terrorism. Last I checked, we weren't the ones threatening military force. Admiral Thekmore's compound eyes focused on Jake with lethal intensity. The mechanic who started this crisis. You will surrender yourself for questioning immediately. I'll surrender myself right after you explain how your people plan to maintain their ships without human technical support, Jake replied. Because unless I'm mistaken, that battlecruiser you're flying runs on fusion reactors built to human specifications. Your targeting computers use human algorithms. Your environmental systems are based on human designs. Want to know what happens when all that breaks down without proper maintenance? For the first time, Admiral Thekmore's expression showed uncertainty. Krillian technical personnel are fully capable of maintaining our own equipment. Chief Bradley stepped into view. Admiral, with all due respect, your technical personnel couldn't maintain a toaster without human instruction manuals. Every major system on that ship was designed by humans or built using human innovations. You want to test whether your people can keep it running without us? Go ahead. But don't blame us when your life support fails and your reactors go critical. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could see the conflict in Admiral Thekmore's expression as the reality of Krillian dependence on human expertise collided with their cultural need to maintain dominance. A new voice came over the communication system, elderly and carrying the weight of immense authority. This is Chancellor Vexthal of the Krillian High Council. Admiral Thekmore, stand down your weapons. The ancient Krillian who appeared on screen made even Ambassador Thurkanael look young. His exoskeleton had deepened to pure black with age, and his compound eyes held the wisdom of someone who had guided his species through centuries of galactic politics. Humans of Nexus Station, Chancellor Vexthal said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The Krillian Confederation wishes to negotiate a resolution to this crisis. Admiral Valdez looked surprised, but maintained her composure. Chancellor, we appreciate your willingness to negotiate. Our terms remain unchanged, full equality and an end to harassment of human personnel. Your terms are noted, the Chancellor replied, but perhaps you will be interested in our analysis of this situation. A holographic display appeared showing technical schematics that Marcus recognized as fusion reactor designs, environmental control systems, and computer algorithms. All bore the distinctive characteristics of human engineering. Our technical assessment, Chancellor Vexthal continued, indicates that human innovations comprise approximately 67% of all critical systems aboard Nexus Station. Similar percentages exist throughout Krillian space, hegemony territory, and Centaurian worlds. The numbers hit the assembled humans like a physical blow. Marcus had known that human technical expertise was important, but he had never imagined the extent to which galactic civilization had become dependent on human innovations. Furthermore, the Chancellor continued, our projections indicate that forcible removal of human technical personnel would result in catastrophic system failures across 17 star systems within 6 months. The economic and social disruption would be unacceptable. Jake smiled for the first time since the crisis began. In other words, Chancellor, you need us more than we need you. The ancient Krillian was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Morrison, 50 years ago, the Krillian Confederation would have considered such a statement grounds for war. Today, we recognize it as an accurate assessment of reality. Admiral Valdez sensed the opening and pressed forward. Chancellor, what are you proposing? Full recognition of human technical sovereignty over systems based on your innovations. Enhanced representation in galactic technical standards committees. And the Chancellor paused, as if the words were difficult to speak. Formal acknowledgement that human engineering principles have become the foundation of modern galactic civilization. The offer was more than any human had dared to hope for. Marcus could see the shock and elation in the faces around him as they realized what was being offered, not just equality, but recognition as the technical leaders of galactic civilization. But Jake wasn't finished. Chancellor, that's a generous offer, but we still need to address the original issue. Instructor Vexhai assaulted a human student. That needs consequences. Chancellor Vexthal's compound eyes turned toward Marcus, studying the teenager who had started this crisis with his passionate defense of his grandfather's memory. Young human, your instructor has been relieved of his position and faces disciplinary action. His behavior was inappropriate. Marcus felt a surge of vindication, but also something deeper, a sense that his grandfather's sacrifice had finally received the recognition it deserved. Admiral Thekmore's face reappeared on screen, his expression showing barely contained fury. Chancellor, this capitulation to human demands undermines centuries of Krillian supremacy in this sector. Admiral, the Chancellor replied calmly, Krillian supremacy was always based on our ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Circumstances have changed. The communication ended, leaving 200 humans alone with the realization that everything had changed. They were no longer guests in galactic civilization, hoping for acceptance. They were partners, essential partners whose expertise was recognized as indispensable. Jake turned to Admiral Valdez. So what's our answer? The Admiral looked around the room at her people, seeing pride and determination in every face. Our answer is yes, with conditions. We accept enhanced status and representation, but we maintain the right to withdraw our services if human personnel are mistreated in the future. Chief Bradley was already moving toward his technical stations. I'll start bringing systems back online, but slowly. Let them sweat a little while longer. As human technical teams began the process of restoring full operations to Nexus Station, Marcus found himself thinking about his grandfather's war stories. Colonel James Chun had fought for humanity's right to exist as a free species. Today, his grandson and 200 other humans had fought for the right to exist as equals. Both battles have been won not through superior firepower, but through superior will, the human refusal to accept defeat even when facing impossible odds. Jake placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder as they watched power levels throughout the station begin returning to normal. Your grandfather would be proud, kid. You stood up for his memory, and you helped change the galaxy. Marcus looked at the displays showing human technical teams being welcomed back into alien quarters, no longer as servants or specialists, but as the acknowledged masters of the technology that kept galactic civilization functioning. No, Marcus replied, thinking of the stories of desperate battles and impossible victories that had shaped his childhood. Grandpa and his generation fought for our survival. We fought for our respect. But the war they really won was the war for our future. Outside the viewports, 3 warships that had arrived to threaten human personnel were now requesting technical assistance from human engineering teams. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently, not through conquest or diplomacy, but through the simple demonstration of indispensable competence. Humanity had finally found its place among the stars, not as warriors or diplomats or traders, but as the builders and fixers whose expertise made galactic civilization possible. It was a lesson that would echo through the corridors of Nexus Station and beyond, carried by students and diplomats to every corner of known space. When you push humans into a corner, you don't get surrender. You get innovation. And sometimes innovation changes everything. The Academy bells rang across the station, their harmonic frequencies once again perfectly calibrated and maintained. But now they carried a different message, not just a call to learning, but a reminder that some lessons can only be taught by those brave enough to refuse to back down. Marcus Chun walked through corridors where humans were once again welcomed as equals, carrying with him the knowledge that his grandfather's legacy lived on in every fusion reactor, every environmental control system, and every computer algorithm that kept the galaxy running. The war for respect was over. Humanity had won.